Welcome back. This is Alex from Studio Trejo, and today we're going to review the Vivitar Series 1 24-48mm f3.8 zoom lens. This lens is not only part of the venerable Series 1 line for Vivitar, but I consider this zoom a time capsule of what forward-thinking lens designers were producing when lens companies were all competing to meet the demand of photographers in the 1970s. In this case, a wide-angle zoom that could be corrected from 24mm to 48mm while holding a constant f3.8 aperture. Did they succeed? Could a zoom lens this wide capture the needed resolution for great imagery? And can this vintage zoom lens still be usable 50 years after its creation? Let's find out by jumping into the key features of this lens. The Vivitar Series 1 24-48 f3.8 zoom lens has a maximum and constant aperture of f3.8 and stops down to f22. It has 6 aperture blades that create 6-pointed sun stars on bright points of light. It weighs 550 grams or 1.3 pounds, and it has a large and modern 77 diameter filter thread size. This lens has a complex 10 elements in 11 groups that incorporates 2 independent moving groups and a system that keeps a constant f3.8 throughout the zoom range. The lens doesn't require clever tricks for close focusing. It natively focuses down to 2 feet or 0.6 meters from the focus plane, which gives it a 1:11 maximum reproduction ratio. Not too bad for a zoom lens of this age. Now let's talk about build quality and handling. The company Nikon was the lens manufacturer. Since Vivitar was not a builder of glass but a marketer of lenses, commissioning Japanese manufacturers to build the lenses with a Vivitar faceplate was par for the course. To describe the build of this lens is nothing short of beautiful. Mostly metal and glass, well balanced with a glossy sheen. A large front element that turns when you focus and extends when you zoom. It's a short and stubby lens compared to other zooms in this class, but there is a compact elegance to the build that makes this lens fit very easily into the Series 1 lineup. The focus scale is painted and engraved along with the focal length numbers. And while the aperture ring is made of plastic, it doesn't feel flimsy or cheap. The focus ring has a very smooth focus throw with hard stops at minimum and infinity. Perfect for video work. With an even smaller zoom ring, like really small, just enough to turn it, the zoom ring moves from 24 to 48, which is always strange to say. I always want to say 24 to 50, but it is actually 24 to 48. Speaking of 24mm, this setting is only 4mm away from 28. And if you look around on the internet, you will find plenty of zooms that start at 28mm. But the difference between the two focal lengths is very noticeable and worth considering. That extra 4mm will help in tight spaces or to get that expansive, all-encompassing feel into your image. You can feel the 24mm. And finally, this lens was made in Japan. Okay, so it's built well and it's fancy looking. But what's the image quality like? At 24mm f3.8, the center is relatively sharp and gets softer, even smudgier at the edges. Stop down to f5.6 and contrast kicks in and the center sharpness improves dramatically and spreads out to the corners, also eliminating the chromatic aberration. Stop down to f11 or f16 for maximum resolution, and at f22 we see the effects of diffraction. At 35mm f3.8, the center is relatively sharp again, but the corners look better than at 24mm. Stop down and contrast and corner sharpness normalizes. 48mm is very identical to 35 in the sharpness contrast category throughout the aperture range, so at least there's some consistency. Next, vignetting. Vignetting is present at f3.8 but disappears completely at 5.6 and not noticeable as the aperture gets smaller, so that's a nice plus for this lens. Lens flare is just okay on this lens. I wouldn't say it's controlled, but it isn't wild like some other lenses that have multiple rings or colors. It's there under certain situations, but it doesn't distract. Because minimum focusing is down to 2 feet on this lens, you can get close to the subjects and create bokeh. But because this is an f3.8 lens, you're only going to get so much. And if you want real bokeh, you will need a lens that has a larger aperture or goes longer on the focal length. All in all, the bokeh you do get is pleasing, except at certain distances, typical for vintage lenses. Colors are very muted on this zoom, which can be adjusted later in post, but can take you by surprise when you see your images at first. While in photography this may pose a problem, for video shooters this provides an excellent opportunity to color grade or use custom LUTs on your footage, as the muted colors that this lens is rendering lends itself to that kind of image processing. In either case, the colors are on the cooler side of the spectrum. The black and whites are film-like. I love using this lens, especially for video. You get a lot of focal range with this lens, and its two-touch system makes it easy to use in video setups. It's also small and easy to carry in your bag, and its natively neutral palette really lends itself to post-processing. Or not, you can just use the image it renders, giving it a very unique feel. The drawbacks are easy to pick out with a lens made 50 years ago. While the focal range is useful, the aperture is just okay, making it more of a landscape lens than a portrait lens. This lens is also not parfocal, so you will have to adjust the focus ring after zooming. This is also considered a rare lens, and collectors will inflate the prices on online auction sales. So what's my take on this lens? It's a lens that can cover a very useful zoom range. It keeps a constant aperture. It renders a vintage look unique to this lens. It's small and easy to carry. Its two-touch system is great for video shoots. It has that Series 1 build quality, and it's a keeper for me. If you find one, check it out. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button below, and we will see you on the next vintage lens review.